So today I wanted to go through and do a sketchbook tour for one of the only sketchbooks I really have left. I've lost a lot in the different moves I've done, but most of my childhood was spent just filling up sketchbooks. So this is one of the only ones that is not incredibly damaged. As you can see, it's still in pretty rough shape, but it kind of incorporates all the different styles that I was doing when I was young. There was a lot of really graphic, kind of black and white work. I started bringing in a little bit of color here and there. But it's definitely the sketchbook where I kind of learned to develop my own kind of unique take on pen and ink work. I kind of figured out the way that I loved using line for sure in this sketchbook. As you can see on the first page, there's a mixture of even different types of inks here. There's kind of the micron pen, that kind of solid black line, a little bit of a ballpoint pen here, so you get those gradients and the shading. Experimenting with some kind of caricatures, a few different kind of faces taking place here. I think this was a character that I was talking to my wife about, and before she was my wife back in the day, we had talked about this kind of wandering boy character in a fantasy world. So you see like a giraffe head here and just abstract shapes and kind of surrounding strangers. I never ended up making this story, but I was trying to develop like an interesting character for her to kind of think about and visualize. These are some kind of just random figures here. I think I started drawing a face here, and then it kind of turned into this kind of strange looking, almost circus type of character here. A lot of detail on these exaggerated limbs. As you can see, there's been a little bit of water damage on this sketchbook. It definitely throws off the feeling a little bit. This was a guy, I was at the airport waiting for my flight, and I saw this guy. He was very well dressed. Really interesting character, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to draw him. There's some little random sketches here. I've always loved hands and drawing hands, and I think as a symbol they can mean a lot of different things. So I wanted to kind of incorporate these weird, kind of strange, curvy, almost floral-like, vine-like elements and try to build up a hand out of those elements. I always really liked this. It's very heavily shaded. I think I just didn't ever stop shading it until one of my pens ran out or something, because it got very dark in its values. But I still really like this one a lot and how it turned out. It's not even connected, this page is. Some of these pages are just floating. This is kind of an interesting, almost sea diver type of character here. The way these like shapes took place. A lot of times it seems like the characters kind of develop as I'm drawing. I don't necessarily even start with a plan in mind. And there's some kind of goofy sketches here, some weird little yak creature. He's very kind of interesting, square-headed, androgynous character in the corner here. Character with very big lips down here. A lot of randomness. I think I had this in one of my classes at one point when I was in college. This was, as you can see, astronomy schedule for my astronomy class. Probably some notes from class, and then just doodling in between, of course. Now this one I really like. These three figures. Well, more of two figures in a portrait, but again, there's a lot of heavy shading here, but I was really experimenting and kind of trying to figure out the way I wanted to use shadow and light, and this is all of that work was done really in this sketchbook, was trying to figure out my own take on light and how to use it correctly. I liked this kind of very strong symbolic figure here, or at least the way that the geometry of shoulders and head and neck, very rigid. I really like the rigid nature of that character. I really like this giant, totally just randomly abstract piece. A lot of different, little floral elements here. Some of these elements I still use in my paintings to this day, which, this sketchbook's at least 10 years old, if not more. Some more notes, kind of journal notes, but what I really liked doing was kind of, with extra space, creating these kind of random borders around little notes and things that I was writing. None of the notes are, I don't think, really, they don't say much of anything besides maybe like a slight journal entry or something, or notes on class, but this one was kind of interesting. I mean, I'm usually turning, just like my paintings, I'm turning my pieces around and around as far as the way that they're meant to be seen. So there's characters going this direction, there's characters going this direction. A lot of things end up being kind of upside down. You can view them from different ways, even if there are characters in them. These very exaggerated proportions again here. Kind of these long, almost like Tim Burton-like characters are kind of taking place there. I was starting to also experiment with contrast between kind of flat shapes and these kind of shaded regions as well. kind of natural fluid-like shapes mixed with very flat graphic shapes. I started doodling. I remember there was like a hand that appeared, and then I kind of created this body randomly off of that, and then a head with this natural flowing kind of almost hair-like forms behind the head just naturally appeared and started taking place without much thought, really. I mean, I think I started with some of these loose lines here, as you can see. That was technically where I started. I started to bring in a little bit of color, very light color, as you can see here, kind of like a light salmon color. I remember it was this sketch I really started to get a grasp on the microns and how I liked to use them. The kind of sporadic cross-hatching, but really no rhyme or reason as to what type of cross-hatching I was using. I liked it a little bit more rough and randomized as far as line work goes. This little design here, I like this corner a lot, so I took that and blew that up and printed some of my first t-shirts from that design. And then I was starting to develop these little faces too that kind of I later ended up incorporating into a lot of my work. I believe just kind of break down the figure into these really simple, caricaturized, almost cartoonish in their simplicity. I think it was definitely, I mean, I was drawing as often as possible. I was definitely kind of just picking up my sketchbook for all the free time I had during any moment I could, just to kind of fill it out with whatever. I really did not judge a lot of the work I was doing very harshly. And I think I really have fond memories of the sketchbook because of that. These are just random notes, random illustrations for things. But I mean, some pages were a complete mess. I mean, this was just, I think, no thought whatsoever. I mean, playing around with large shapes, starting large shapes, and then creating whatever I could from them, almost like a Rorschach test or something. Just trying to figure out where I could bring things, where I could push things. I mean, some of these things don't connect or make any sense at all. You know, you see this character developed here, and it definitely is a certain emotion. I mean, certain pages you can kind of sense a little more freedom. Certain pages you can sense, you know, maybe that day was a little darker, a little more upsetting. I had a friend that owned a septic company, and he wanted a logo, and this is the one that I gave him, even though it had no relation to much of anything. I just thought it looked really cool. But one of the guys that worked for the company liked it so much, he said if his boss used it as a logo, as a tattoo. When somebody tattoos your work on their body, that's definitely a huge compliment. There's some more just random sketches, odd proportions in the body here. I was not using a lot of reference for anatomy, as you can tell, just kind of drawing randomness as much as possible. This was some of the work got a little more graphic because I was trying stronger. It definitely had a more strong illustration vibe because I was trying to think about compositions for clothing design or shirts that I wanted to get done and printed. So you can kind of see, I was starting with just really random 2-color designs, thinking about little faces and small detailed kind of drawings that I could put on there. I thought about maybe doing a brand called All One, just concept type stuff. These were a little bit random. These were potential tattoo designs for my friend of mine that wanted a lion on a crest done. It's a portrait of my wife who was sleeping. I wasn't very good at realism back in the day, and I've since then learned how to draw a face in a portrait and shade it correctly, but back then I was still learning for sure. Some more kind of random sketches, faces. All these colors bleed out in each other. It's so sad when an old sketchbook gets water damaged. And this one page stuck to this other page. I started to bring in some acrylic work. I remember being inspired by Basquiat the first time I saw some of his work when I was young. I really loved how kind of wild and crazy his use of color was, so it inspired me to start using it in some of the sketchbook pieces I was doing, thinking about values and color and the way it works across the different parts of the body, the face, the chest. I like this guy, just kind of unique and strange. These guys have more of a characterized look, of course. Those long heads with those long features, tiny bodies. But I liked them. They were kind of very quickly done, and the faster I learned how to draw, the more I kind of developed a confidence in my ability to draw something. I didn't feel like I became confident first necessarily. I felt like I learned the technical aspect of drawing quickly and then went from there. More portraits sleeping. They almost get more distorted as I continue on down the page, and they end up in different kind of random doodle areas as well. Lots of random details here. This little figure with the kind of odd hat seemed to be a recurring theme in a lot of my work. So this page got destroyed. These sketchbooks definitely took a beating, unfortunately, over the years. And it was amazing to see that there were still some blank pages actually, but I guess I didn't feel the need to fill some of those out. Just some kind of playing around with using larger forms to depict the figure. So you see this kind of large, elongated form, but then just with the face, just hands. That's kind of some of the first look at the concepts that came later in my work, actually. We were practicing logos for that clothing brand that I mentioned earlier. Even when I was practicing logos or doing something that, you know, I wanted to create, I would still end up doodling all over the page. I mean, it was regardless of what I was doing, whether I was in school or whether it was anything else, I would just be doodling constantly. This was like an idea for like a tag on the back of the shirt. You can see size, medium, 100% cotton, wool apparel. I didn't ever really end up making that clothing brand, but I still like the idea of printing things and putting designs out there. These were done kind of with a t-shirt design in mind. I happen to have a green pen on me this day, so these 2 pages ended up being green. There's some logo work for a specific project. I really liked when I did bring in color, because it kind of stood out on the page. It definitely, amidst all of the black and white that I was doing. Obviously, not having a great day, as you can see. This particular day, whatever day this was, I'm not sure, many years ago. These were some of the first figure studies that I was trying to think about for some of my paintings, because at this point I was starting to paint and with acrylic on canvas, and I was trying to do local art shows, and I had some other friends that lived nearby that were putting together group shows and very small, you know, like small restaurants and things like that. So in the very beginning, that's what I was trying to think about, that kind of work. There's another figure here, kind of playing around more with more of a symmetrical body position, stylized and using more shapes, geometric forms that were starting to come into play. And starting to think about abstract pieces as well. I believe this is the right way I was thinking about it. Playing around more with line work and shape volume, how to fill up compositions, some more notes. It's funny, there's more empty space in here than I thought, so we'll skip the back. Sometimes I drop a sketchbook and I just never pick it up again for no reason at all. Some little portraits here, kind of strange, you know, almost worm-like forms taking place here. Very loose, random sketches otherwise. I like this character here, this face. This kind of random headdress type of situation. Androgynous portraits, a lot of them side profiles, very abstracted body and kind of head area. I took on a lot of these kind of swirly, curvaceous kind of shapes and little random geometric forms, but mostly at the time, mostly kind of almost insect-looking types of inspired shapes. More logo work. You can see as time went on, I got more serious about actually doing the clothing brand, but I just couldn't quite bring it all together. It was difficult for me to pull some of those things together. I guess it's good to reflect on that stuff and where you're coming from, what you were gonna do. Some random drawings here, very random kind of ogre looking like face here. This is quite a few details on this page for sure. A lot of small characters here. I think I had just gotten a really small pen, so I was just using as much of it as possible on this page. And I wasn't, stopping or restricting myself from kind of developing any kind of little face. This is such a funny little asymmetrical looking childlike face here. But then there's little skulls mixed throughout, these tall figures. There wasn't any thought about what I should be drawing. I think that's what that's definitely the theme for this entire sketchbook, mostly. Besides a few pages with notes and some random, there's just no judgment, any direction. I think that is kind of how a sketchbook should be used in some sense. There's definitely more of a formal study that you can do with sketching when it comes to if you're trying to learn anatomy or something. But otherwise, just fill up everything as much as possible with every bit of randomness that you can think of. I would just start doodling and then kind of step back for a second, see about the composition, continue it onward. If it went off the page, didn't matter. When I was young, I used to work at an ice cream shop, actually. And when the owner found out that I could draw and paint, she hired me to do some of the signs. So I did a sign, which they still use actually to this day because she had them laminated, which is cool because I drove by it the other day. But I made a sign for their lavender flavored ice cream. So I was starting to sketch the idea out here. And then I figured okay, I gotta leave plenty of room for the word because otherwise I'll run out on the paper I had. So it was all these big sheets of paper, and I painted, stalks, lavender branches and flowers around the words, and the words were done in as interesting of a way as I could do them. But then I came back to this sketchbook and just filled out the rest of the page. As you can see, I didn't draw these characters beforehand, they were done afterwards, just completely for fun. Again, just working with random proportions and kind of shading and trying to develop my use of line and pen and ink. They're all completely so different. I think I started doing one of these round shapes, and then I did a few together, and then a face kind of formed randomly, and it was funny how it all just kind of happens like that. I think I tried sketching the room that I was sitting in, and I just liked doing it so much I don't think I ever did again. I always loved sketching, just not from life, but just from randomness. From my own imagination, for sure. It still embodies a lot of my work today. It's mostly abstraction with a little bit of figurative work is how I think of it, as far as my paintings go and all those types of things. My wife and I, at the time, she was my girlfriend, and we were living together, and we were trying to figure out planter boxes and a layout for the farm outside, the farmland outside of the house that we were living in, and how we'd like to kind of set it up with a pathway and things. So you could see those patterns here. But then the rest of the page is just wild, crazy sketches of little skulls and these little kind of strange faces down here. And it's definitely a strong combination of just everyday life with random sketching. It turned out to be kind of a journal in a sense like that. I really like this guy here. I started with this weird jelly bean-like shape, and then the portrait kind of worked out and took effect. And then it just had this momentum going backward. It almost reminds me of a motorized, he should be on a scooter or something like that. But he is kind of also the machine. It reminds me of what AI spits out when you tell it that you want to see somebody riding a motorcycle, and it combines the person with the motorcycle. This was a potential composition for a painting that I was going to do. I ended up kind of flipping the format and doing the portrait on the other side, but it took on a very similar idea. I remember showing it to a relative of mine, a young nephew of mine at the time after I did it, and they didn't really like it. They thought it was weird. But by this point, I'd gotten used to that kind of thinking. This was done at a sketch party at a friend's house. So a bunch of artists got together and we were drawing, and I drew this kind of abstract character, a lot of the signature kind of extended limbs and exaggerated features, this weird kind of long alien-like head here, and then these strange tube-like machine/flower-like formations going offward. And then I had my wife color it in. They had a bunch of art supplies all over the table, and this is kind of what it turned into. These are the really last few pages. I think I drew this strange, side profile, which turned into a mechanical foot almost, it looks like down here. And then we got this weird guy down here. It reminds me of a little bit of like a Neon Flux character or something. This guy I actually did a print of back in the day. Such a strange creature, these tiny little feet leading into this big abstract kind of natural looking conglomeration of shapes. Little face up here, little jaw, as you can see, it's coming off the side there. And then a quick little sketch and note about a potential sweatshirt / hoodie idea that I had here. And then I think I did just a whole page of just characters. I wanted to kind of play around with some character ideas and designs. I would do a lot of these, but not necessarily with any kind of intention in mind. I mean, just to develop interesting characters that I thought were kind of unique looking and usually pretty asymmetrical, kind of strange looking, odd looking types of characters. I don't draw a ton of this type of thing anymore, but I think having to go through all of the trial and error of what kind of proportions make sense and what things don't make sense, and learning to see things a little bit differently later on kind of led to where the work is now. This page just came off now. I mean, as you can see, it's not in the best shape. Again, mixing different types of inks and pens. I think I use Sharpie here. I never use Sharpie for anything. It's too thick and I can never get any detail with it. But taking odd shapes, turning them into characters is a good practice for me, I think, just to kind of really challenge the imagination and see what you could develop from even the most unattractive random shapes. This was like a giant teardrop shape, I think, and then I added this strange abstract mixture of body parts. Now that I'm seeing the legs and the feet, they're pretty odd, but it was fun to do, to experiment and to kind of create anything that came to mind. I mean, the sketchbook was truly a tool, really, more than anything. As you can see, I used it as a painting palette at some point when I was doing one of the pieces I talked about. Unfortunately, it's very damaged. It's seen better days for sure, but this particular sketchbook definitely meant a lot to me. I spent many years kind of going back and forth between it. It didn't take me years to fill out, but I did have it in my possession for a long time while I was drawing a lot and really spending a lot of time thinking about what kind of work I wanted to create. And it was kind of there when I was in school, not pursuing any kind of artwork, and then it was still present when I was out of school and trying to be more involved with group shows and do things like that. I actually started on my career. So it means a lot to me for that reason, even if it is in terrible shape. Thank you for watching.